Hi, this is John Garfalo, Vice President of Community Investment at your Akron Community Foundation. On behalf of our board, staff, and volunteers, we want to thank you for agreeing to be a host at this year's On the Table Greater Akron Conversations. It's because of people like you that we're able to have so many unique voices heard all throughout our community. If you needed any additional assistance, please do not hesitate to give us a call at 330-376-8522. And don't forget to come into our office at 345 West Cedar Street anytime before October 3rd to pick up your host bag, which contains all the information needed to host your successful conversation. Again, thank you.
My name is Katie Fry, and I'm the field organizer for On the Table Greater Akron, and I'd like to welcome you to the host information training. Today we're going to be walking you through a few of the details about how to be a host for On the Table Greater Akron. Also talking about host and superhost guidelines, how to plan your meeting and how to facilitate it, so the youth conversations, things we want to talk about on October 3rd in terms of what we would like you to be doing that day or the day that you have your conversation, looking over the host toolkit, and we won't be able to cover the questions and answers since this is the online training. The Chicago Community Trust started the On the Table initiative 5 years ago. They were interested in holding community-wide conversations to hear what residents in Chicago had to say about how to strengthen their community. They have increased their participation every year from 5,000 to 100,000 people having conversations about how to strengthen the Chicago region. In 2017, the Knight Foundation decided that they thought this was a great idea, so they would like to replicate it in 10 of their Knight cities at various community foundations, and Akron has been selected to be one of those cities for all 3 years. In the first 2 years, a combined over 12,000 people actually participated from Summit and Medina counties from all walks of life, all socioeconomic backgrounds. Very diverse folks gathered over mealtime conversations or snack time conversations to discuss the issues that impact our life in Akron and the greater community. After the conversations, we have compiled the feedback through the survey. The results are part of a report, and those are available from 2017 and 2018 at onthetableakron.com. The hosts are the most important component, I think, of our conversations in terms of they're host-driven. Everyone in our community is invited to host a conversation. They will be about 60 to 90 minutes in duration. We asked you to invite 8 to 12 friends, neighbors, colleagues, family members to join your conversation. You can hold the conversations anywhere where it's comfortable for you. You can have it in your home. You can all meet at a restaurant. You can go to a coffee shop. We encourage businesses to hold the conversations maybe over meal times and their lunchrooms, wherever you can gather together to have conversation. The conversations and discussions will be either formal or informal, depending on what you decide. You can host a full-course meal. You can ask everybody to bring a potluck dish. You can have a brown bag conversation. You can meet at a restaurant, and everybody just purchases something there and talks together. The idea behind the conversation being a mealtime conversation is the concept of breaking bread together so that the conversations are more wide open, more social, more visionary, more creative, instead of going to a meeting where everyone is sitting down with their pen and paper and talking about how we can improve our community. So it's just an opportunity for people to be more sociable and community-minded. So we're asking every host or the organization itself to choose one or two of the priorities to discuss this year. We'll discuss more about that in the future. The Superhost guidelines, we have some organizations that we're very thankful to that they have decided that they'd like to hold 15 or more conversations of 8 to 12 individuals. We asked the superhosts to identify hosts for all 15 conversations. But you can have, one host can actually facilitate more than one conversation. So one host can facilitate 2, 3, 5, however many they are interested in hosting. So But we're asking each host from the super hosts to register to be a host and to register to participate in a host information session, either online or in person. Those of you who are listening are already participating online. Super hosts will be listed on the Table Greater Akron website so that the community can know who has supported the On the Table in this capacity. On the Table impact we'd like to share with you is that participants are asked to complete a short survey following the conversations so that we can understand what they had to say in their conversations, since there are no note takers in the conversations. This year, Heart Research and Public Opinion Strategies will analyze all the data that come from the surveys, document the ideas, the conversations, and the themes that arise from your conversations. Then they will create a report. The Akron Community Foundation will share this report with the community and with you, and everyone who registers on the website as a host or a participant will receive the final report. The data from the report will inform the Community Foundation's grant making in two ways. First of all, proactive grants of $500,000 are being earmarked for combating major issues that are discussed during this year's On the Table. Secondly, the On the Table Community Impact Awards. Last year, we had 26 local nonprofits receive $50,000 in funding for actionable ideas that emerged from their 2018 conversations. This year, up to $100,000, which is up to $2,000 per grant, will be available. As a host, before the event, we're asking you to register at onthetableakron.com as a host. And if you are part of a superhost group, you still need to register as a host, and you would put on the registration form what organization you are hosting for. And then we suggest that you look over the topics for this year. We are encouraging participants to discuss one of our 3 priority areas for 2019, and they are drugs and addiction, our aging seniors, and diversity, equity, and social inclusion. You may also pick a topic that applies more specifically to your organization, group, neighborhood, church, etc., something that's very critical that's happening within that organization currently, or an issue that you're struggling with. But I want to tell you that all of the Community Impact Awards will be for the 3 priority areas selected for this year. So if you're interested in that, you want to stick to one of the 3 priority areas. Also, before your event as a host, you're going to think of what particular time and location you'd like to host your conversation. Remember, they're 60 to 90 minutes, and they can happen anytime throughout the day, wherever you're most comfortable. We would love for you to participate on October 3rd. That's when there's a great big buzz around the community, lots of social media, and a lot of people talking about it that day. But you may hold your conversation anytime a week before October 3rd or to a week after October 3rd. We do think that that expands the possibilities for organizations that hold regular meetings to be able to have their conversations during their regular meetings, or for instance, a church that meets on Sundays, then might be easier for them to hold the conversation on Sunday after their service. Then think about your guest list. We're suggesting 8 to 12 guests is ideal. That way everyone will have a chance to speak. Even smaller, six would be fine too, if that is what you have, that you're choosing to have, or if a couple people don't show up. If you have a larger group than 12, we would suggest that you split it into a few smaller groups so that everyone has a chance to talk. If, for instance, 15 people show up at your conversation and you were only expecting to have one, you might ask around and see if anybody within the group would be willing to facilitate that conversation, and you have a short, sort of like explanation to them about what that would require so that they're prepared to do that. Just take you a couple of minutes for someone who's familiar with being a facilitator, because otherwise, if the group is too large, then many people won't have a chance to share their opinions and ideas. We do encourage you to invite a diverse group of participants because that really enriches the conversation. As a host, your job will be to facilitate the conversation. The first thing when you sit down for the conversation we would ask you to do is set up the expectations from the very beginning. Review how much time you're expecting to talk, if there's going to be time at the end to complete the survey, what the discussion questions are that you're going to be discussing, the priority area that you have chosen, and the focus on sustainable, actionable solutions. You're going to want to share the priority you've chosen and look online at the toolkit at pages 5 through 7 at the related local data that we have shared with you so that you can share that with your participants so they might have a little bit more background about the topic area. And encourage participants to take turns speaking so everyone has a chance to speak. So during the discussion, we suggest you allow the conversation to flow freely while keeping the group focused on the priority area and the questions. Invite your guests to expand on the ideas. Someone might have, an initial idea, and then someone else has a different idea, but ask them to come back and fill in some of the details about their idea so that people can begin to hear something more specific about their idea so that it can sort of come alive in the conversation. So as your guests are going around and sharing their different ideas about the priority area you've selected, you'll begin to hear that themes will emerge from these conversations. And maybe 2 or 3 people are thinking about focusing on addiction within the youth population or something such as that. So maybe then that's a good way to steer the conversation towards the themes that are arising that many people seem to be concerned about at your conversation. If, for instance, your conversation lags, then refer to the toolkit discussion points on pages 5 through 7 to give you some other ideas for expanding the conversation. Throughout the conversation, we would suggest that you manage participation, making sure that everyone has a chance to participate. You know how in every conversation or meeting, there are always certain people that want to sort of talk all the time and other people who are quiet, maybe a little bit more reserved, and they sit back and they don't really share their ideas. So I would suggest as a host or facilitator that you invite the quiet guests to share their ideas. What are they thinking about? Perhaps call them by name and say, Janet, what did you think about this issue? And that gives them more of a space to jump in without having to sort of fight to get their voice in the conversation. And you may have some high-frequency speakers in your conversation, and we suggest that you diplomatically ask them to give others a turn to talk so that they're reminded, because sometimes people, they love to speak and they're excited and full of great ideas, and they sort of forget that maybe the person next to them hasn't had anything to say yet. So use your best diplomacy skills for that one. And at the end of your conversation, we're suggesting that you provide closure on the conversation when the time is coming close to the end. You're going to want to review the actionable solutions that arose from your discussion. Ask somebody at the table to complete the Take Action worksheet, which we will look over in a moment. Encourage your participants to complete the survey, either on paper or online, or to text in to that the number and complete it at that time. If you're going to use a paper survey or have guests complete the text survey at the end of your conversation, remember to leave 15 minutes at the end to complete that survey. And if you use the paper surveys, we're asking you to please collect them right away and return them to Akron Community Foundation as soon as possible. They're not for them to take home and complete. They're for you to them to complete there, and you collect, and your responsibility as a host will be to return them to the Community Foundation. And lastly, we ask you to share stories and photos on social media from your conversations. It's much richer when people are hearing what others had to say at their conversations, then they're able to understand what the greater conversation is around the entire community. So this year on the discussion questions, what we want you to do is to, number one, think about what's your main priority area. Let's say that you're talking about our aging seniors. So you're going to introduce that topic. We're going to speak about our aging seniors. And then you're going to ask the main question, What can we do together to generate positive solutions or to eliminate barriers for seniors to be able to fully participate in our community? So that was and that question you're probably going to spend, I'm guessing, about half your time on that, about the positive solutions that your participants would be able to generate during this, because that's where the meat of the conversation is, all of the ideas that people have. Then when you're sort of narrowing the ideas and you're thinking about maybe you've narrowed them down to a few per table, you might start to think about, well, this is maybe one or two our main ideas that we think are really feasible or doable. So then you want to start asking the question, what specific actionable solutions are needed? So for instance, if your group is thinking about cleaning up a park at the end of the street, and, then how are we going to make that happen? Let's get down to some details about what needs to be done. If it's a, cleaner area, maybe they'll have all the neighbors will come down, so you'll have an opportunity for children of all races and be able to play together and enjoy one another and have experiences at playtime, but normally perhaps they're mostly in the house because the park is not really a place where parents would want to take their children. So then let's say you have that idea, you want to get the park cleaned up at the end of the street, but you need to think like, okay, it's just not the five of us who are going to be doing this. Who else needs to be engaged to make this successful? Who else do we want? We want to talk to other neighbors. We want to talk to the city. We want to talk to some of the people at the Community Foundation about getting them involved and applying for a community impact grant to help us be more successful, because we want to plant some shrubs down there. So there are a lot of things like who needs to be engaged and what specifically do we need to do. And then the last question would be, what are our group or individuals' next steps? If we're going to continue to work as a group together, what do you want to do next? When is our next meeting? Who do we want to invite to the next meeting? Because they're not here today, but they're needed to make sure this project is successful. If you're an individual, perhaps you want to think about what can you as an individual do, or who else can you invite to work with you to make your actionable solution possible. This year, we have 3 new priorities from last year, and so these are the priorities we're asking you to think about and discuss, as we mentioned before, and they are drugs and addiction, our aging seniors, and diversity, equity, and social inclusion. And the goal there is to generate positive solutions that are going to benefit these issues within our community that were identified in the past. The first priority, drugs and addiction, we have decided that we will give you some of the local data so that you understand sort of like the gravity of this situation in our community, as well as then on the right you'll see in the box some discussion points that will help expand the discussion. So we ask that you share the local data with your participants at the beginning when you share which priority you decided to discuss. For instance, in the first one, 2018, an estimated 1,200 Summit County residents entered a local emergency room after overdosing. Most of those who do complete treatment still relapse in the year following treatment, with most relapses occurring within 90 days. About 64% of those entering publicly funded treatment already have one or more previous admissions. And the last one, which is very serious, 15% of Summit County high school students report using prescription drugs without a doctor's prescription one or more times during their young lifetime. So those are all things that are currently happening in our community. One of the reasons why we want to, have this discussion and see how we can improve the situation in our community, along with other organizations who are currently working on that too. So you'll see in the discussion points that we have listed many of the things that you might be discussing. I mean, you might spend the whole time in the discussion talking about the high rate of youth use, but perhaps the conversation lags halfway through and you're like, well, what else can we discuss? This is your place to go to say, okay, let's maybe look at what mental health resources would it be beneficial for youth to understand about, to know about, so that if they feel that they're having an issue, maybe they'll know where to turn for help. So the discussion points are what you're going to use to expand or add to your conversation. The second priority is our aging seniors. Currently, 23% of Summit County is made up of residents 60 and older, but by 2030, that number will rise to over 30%. So about a third of our residents, or almost a third of our residents, will be over 60, and that is much higher than the national average. By an estimated 9,500 seniors aged 60 and older in Summit County fall below the federal poverty level, and many, many more are just above that federal poverty level. And about 3/4 of our residents, some of our older residents, say they cannot afford long-term nursing home care or long-term home care. How are we going to be able to provide for them if 3/4 of people say they can't even afford it? And currently, more than half of senior households in Akron and 41% in the suburbs are individuals living alone. So as people age in place, which is the preferred method of aging, how will they be able to take out their garbage, make all their own meals, clean their homes, things such as that? So these barriers have to be overcome, and if people are living by themselves, it makes it much more difficult. So again, on the side of that slide, you'll see the discussion points. There are so many issues in terms of aging at home. We have listed many of them. So you may have a good discussion for half the conversation about some of these issues, and then you might look down and say, well, we never did discuss about safety and security. That's a big one in terms of the aging population. Or spiritual support. If people can't get out, how do they get to church or their faith communities of their preference? Social isolation. It's isolating to be able to be stuck at home a lot, or not to be able to hear and when you go out and in conversation. So these are all things that you can bring into your discussion. Our last issue, that priority issue, is diversity, equity, and social inclusion. Our local data says that nearly 6 in 10 local Black families struggle to make ends meet, which is more than double the overall average and triple the number of white families. Akron ranks 52nd percentile for overall inclusion, but 73rd for racial inclusion. And remember, we have a very large immigrant community, a refugee and immigrant community in our community as well. And only 15% of Black students are career and college ready, compared to 42% of students overall. These are only a very small number of issues within that diversity, equity, and social inclusion topic. As you can see on the right-hand side, there are many topics within this one that you could select to talk about. You might start out with racism, or sexism, or LGBTQ issues, but then what about developmental disabilities? What about youth and senior inclusion and cross-cultural sensitivity? So these are all issues that you may want to bring into your conversation to enliven it and to enrich it. I mentioned before the Take Action worksheet. This is something that you will have in the host toolkit. Also, you will have online if you want to download that. And you will see that we're asking you to complete this at the end of your conversation. It's primarily for your group to utilize. We'd like you to return a copy of this to the Community Foundation so that you can also share with us what your group decided or was thinking about doing. So the first question is, what can we do together to generate positive solutions? That's your very big question, overall question for the conversation. So those are some of the ideas maybe that came out of your conversation. And we want you to make sure that you include what priority area that you were discussing in your conversation in terms of at the top of the page. And what specific actionable solutions are needed. So getting more detailed here. Maybe the big idea was, the opiate epidemic. But, so with that, what do you think would be a solution, actionable solution that we could actually implement in our community? In order to do that, who would need to be engaged to be successful? Probably not going to be able to do it on your own, unless you are an agency perhaps that supports a community of addiction. And lastly, what are individual or groups' next steps? This is something where you may or may not be planning to do something in the future. Perhaps you're sharing your ideas only, which is perfectly fine, or perhaps you're interested in working on a project together or implementing an idea that came out of your conversation. The guest sign-in sheet is something for you as a host to have your participants complete when they arrive at the conversation. We also ask you that before people leave, that you take a look at these email addresses and that you make sure that they're legible so that you can read them, so that we have accurate email addresses. So as much as possible, we are asking the hosts to go to onthetableakron.com guest registration to submit your participants' names and email addresses so we can send them to the evaluation companies so then they can send them a link to the survey as well as the final report and ongoing information about On the Table. We will not be using their emails for other Akron Community Foundation emails. But if that's not possible for you to enter them yourself and you want to submit this form on paper, please either bring it to the Community Foundation immediately or scan it and send it, or take a photo of it and email it to the info@onthetableakron.com no later than October 9th so that we can send out the links to the email for the link to the survey so that people can complete the survey in time for it to be counted. We've mentioned the survey several times, and we wanted to make you aware of the survey will be available beginning September 26th. That's a week before October 3rd, and other people may be having conversations a week before, so it will be available both on the website and you'll be able to text it in to 797979. You can text OTTOH, On the Table, Ohio. We're asking you to have your participants complete the survey by October 17th. After that date, the surveys will not be counted. So also a web link will be sent to all participants via an email or available online at the onthetableakron.com website. Copies of the paper survey will be available in your host bag, or you can download it from the website. And we're asking that you, again, have your participants complete the paper survey and bring them to the Akron Community Foundation by October 11th. We're also asking you to spread the word about the survey. If your guests did not complete them during the conversation, it's very important that we receive their feedback so that they can their ideas can be part of the report to the entire community. You might send them an email a couple of days later reminding them, don't forget to complete your survey, it's important. This survey will be available in English and Spanish. And we are also having, the Community Foundation is also having translators help residents complete the survey through the Exchange House conversations. So if you know of anyone who might need that support, you might ask them to go to attend the Exchange House conversations so that they can get support in completing their surveys. And the survey will be open for 2 weeks, but the earlier you complete it, the better. Once again, we will be having youth participate in the conversations. We are encouraging you to invite your students that might be in schools or in various youth groups to participate in their conversations. Akron Public Schools will be having all of their freshmen participate in conversations, and Summit Education Initiative is hosting a conversation at Quaker Station, where 100 suburban and other city school districts students will be sending their students, and Akron Public Schools will be sending students. So 200 students will be sitting together that will be sharing their ideas on these priority issues and hearing from one another what students from another district might have to say about what's happening in their own districts that they live with day to day. So students who participate in a conversation will be able to provide feedback through a youth survey. It will only be 5 to 7 questions. No identifiable data will be collected, and no open-ended questions will be asked. Parents and guardians will be sent a letter home by the school or youth group and given the opportunity to opt their students in or out of the survey. So any student who is given permission to participate in the survey will be given a link on a small card so that they will be able to participate. There will be no paper surveys for youth, and it's not available by text. So that we will be controlling the youth who do participate. Last year we had 417 youth surveys completed, so we were very delighted with their responses. To-dos on October 3rd. The guest registration, we're asking you to submit your guests' names and email addresses on the website. To complete the survey will be available beginning September 26th in both paper and online formats and are due no later than October 17th. You may consider getting funded for your ideas that come out of the conversation, to implement your ideas that come out of the conversation. We will have up to $100,000 in funding available at up to $2,000 per grant through the On the Table Community Impact Awards. They will be open beginning November 1st and going through November 30th to apply online. And we're also asking you to share on social media using hashtag #OnTheTableAkron to tag us, and also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I would suggest that if you have not already done so, you download or look at the toolkit online. And also, you're able to pick up a bound copy of the toolkit as well as your host bag, along with On the Table pens and notebooks for your participants at Akron Community Foundation. So please stop by there. So take a look through the toolkit. You will notice that many of the things that I discussed today and that were on the slides are included in the toolkit. So this gives you your own copy of the to-dos, things that we're looking for you to discuss, the priority issues, the discussion points, etc. So please review that carefully before your conversation and have that beside you as you begin your conversation. Thank you very much for attending this online host information training. We're very grateful that you're willing to host this year, and we're asking you to consider perhaps inviting a friend who might be able to host also their own conversation. So that would double our numbers if everyone invites another person to host too. So please consider that. And if you have any questions, since this is an online training, please give a call to the foundation or go to info@onthetableakron.com, and your question will be answered through email. So thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you on October 3rd.